Si chiamava Giromina, bionda saccarina, vispa birichina, molto piperina, quando era mattina e la poverina si doveva alzar. Un robusto giovanotto era bello accanto e d'inverno sotto con il suo capotto col calzone rotto come un zerbinotto stava a sospirar.
All right, good evening and welcome to Caffe Lena. Thank you all for joining us here tonight for our storytelling night and open mic. If you're new to this event, we have a featured storyteller who will be doing 30 minutes to start the night off, and then after that we'll begin the open mic portion of the event where everyone gets 10 minutes. I'd love to introduce our featured storyteller for this evening. It's actually two storytellers. We have a duo here today. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Barry and Jeri, the Storycrafters.
Seems they let the dogs in tonight. I heard that.
So
He's
hey,
sitting there
everybody.
with his head down.
It's great to see you all here tonight. Thank you for braving the parking in Saratoga during August. We know what it took because we braved the parking in Saratoga tonight ourselves. And here we are. Yay.
And it struck me that the main story we're going to do for you tonight is very appropriate for Caffe Lena in a funny way, being a folk club.
Well, okay. All right.
Well, isn't it?
Well,
Because it's a folk club.
Well, because it's a folk club.
Yeah.
Folk music, right? Yeah. All right. So in our house, like, we sometimes will find ways of, dealing with some of the life's daily stresses by saying something that might sound a little unexpected to you, but to us it's very expected. The thing we'll often say is, things could be worse. You could be driving the poop truck.
And this is a saying that comes from our experience working at folk festivals where there are porta potties. And in particular, there's one folk festival that we've told stories at for years called the Falcon Ridge Folk Festival. It happened for years in our own county, down there in Columbia County. It's moved over to Connecticut now, but at that festival, the main stage that we performed on was the family tent. There were a couple of other stages there, and sometimes we were on those, but the family stage was our stage that we were at pretty much every year when we were there. And on the family stage, one of the nice features about it was that it was right next to the food vendors. That meant that all of the smells from the food vendors would waft over, and we would smell all the delicious food cooking as we were performing, and the audience would smell it too.
It was delicious. Now, the family area was demarcated with orange snow fencing. And so there was only one little entrance that people could come in and come out. There were two big tents. One was the performance tent, and the other was a crafts tent. And we would often be on the stage of the performance tent. And when we were there, we would gaze out at the patchwork of audience members sitting in blankets in the grass. And then through the back, because it was an open air tent, just the top, you could, there were poles, of course, but you could see out all sides. And we would gaze at the crafts tent back there, and then off to another side, like one side, right near that little opening in the snow fence, there was a big red porta potty, which was really useful for little kids so that they could get right from the family tent or the crafts tent and get right in there if they needed to get there.
Because when they needed to get there, they needed to get there. And that was great because the other porta potties that were near the family stage were a good long walk away, and there was often a long line at them. To get to those, you had to go out through the snow fence, through the audience area, out through the snow fence, and then walk all the way around the performance tent. And behind the stage, about 50 yards behind the family tent stage was a big long line of porta potties. Now, for the audience sitting on the floor, when looking up at us up on the stage, they couldn't see the porta potties behind us because they were off to one side. But what they could see behind us was this little hand wash station that was behind us. And then on the other side of that, they could see the long line of people waiting to get into those porta potties.
Now, one summer, we were there, and we were in the middle of a set. We were telling what we believe was our adaptation of The Gingerbread Man.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in the middle of that story. I had just popped the gingerbread cookie in the oven when all of a sudden I heard a rumbling sound behind me.
Thunderstorms are not unusual at all at Falcon Ridge Folk Festival. It's very common for one to come up over the hillside there and then just dump down on the festival. We often are working in mud there. But this was a different kind of rumble. It didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like a truck that was pulling up behind us.
Now, we're storytellers. We like to take in what's going on, right? Many of you understand that. Like the time when we had a helicopter land down right in the field near us, we would have liked a little warning for that. We could have planned something. But we like to bring in what's happening in the environment into the story. And so we needed to know what that was. And so I said something about, checking the gingerbread cookie in the oven. And then I subtly turned my little head.
And I did the same thing. I looked over my shoulder, and then we saw what was behind us. And then we looked at each other with this alarm on our faces. Then we looked at the audience, and we smiled, and we kept going with the story as if nothing was going on, but there was definitely something going on.
And then the sound stopped, and we thought, maybe nothing will go on.
All right, now, the thing that was going on, some of you have already figured out, was that one of the porta potty servicing vehicles had pulled up behind us over to that line of porta johns that was about 50 yards behind the stage. We figured that it was going to park and stay there until the end of our set and then empty out and clean out all the porta potties in between the sets on the stage. Unfortunately, that was not the plan of the driver.
Yeah, we were hoping for that plan, and you would think, right?
For those of you that are not familiar with these trucks, think of them like a pet owner that's cleaning out the cat litter box, okay? But they don't use shovels or scoops to do it. There's a big long hose on the back of the truck, and the driver either uses a motor to unwind the hose or just does it by hand and then takes the hose into the porta-john and drops it down into the... You get the idea.
And so, that was possibly going to happen during our set. We'd never had this honor before.
Right.
Who wants this honor in the middle of a set?
We were used to the smells of the food wafting across the stage, but this was a different kind of smell that we were maybe going to experience.
And then we heard all the sounds.
The sounds. There were two sounds. One sound was like a jet engine roaring as if it was taking off, but then that was mixed with a gurgle like something drowning in a swamp. And
sorry that you're eating right now, but
it's where it's going. And then the smell came.
Yeah, and it hit us first. Yeah, right. It really hit us. And, it was all we could do to manage telling the story and breathing at the same time. But then we watched as it hit the audience. Now, this was the most unusual audience wave in the world because it was like one face passing a grimace of disgust from one to the other, to the other, to the other. And then it went back in line from the first row to the second row to the third row. And we watched as this whole audience practically swooned, clapped their hands over their faces, covered they were suffering.
Well, we did what we could. We made some jokes about how the smell in the kitchen when the gingerbread man was cooking was better than the smell at the tent at that time. And when we all got to the part where we had to sing Run, Run as Fast as You Can, we considered actually doing it, but we didn't. We stayed there, we powered through, we told the story, and we made it through the set because the show must go on no matter how much it stinks.
And we hoped that was the only time in the history of the Storycrafters' career that anyone ever said that our show stinks.
But you know what? as we were telling the story, it struck us that that truck was 50 yards behind us, and the smell was that strong for us. So how bad did it have to be for that poor driver of the truck?
Well, we just couldn't imagine it. And there we were. We're telling the story. We're managing the situation. We're trying to keep their spirits up. We're trying to keep our spirits up. And we're also thinking about the driver. And we realized things could be worse. We could be driving the poop truck.
And that's where the saying came from for us.
And we realized that we were not the only people to have such an honor bestowed upon us during the festival.
I'm not sure if it was the same year or if it was the following year, but we were at Falcon Ridge and we were walking around. We were in between sets. And so we were just wandering, and we saw that the McCrells were going to be doing a set on the family stage. Some of you might be familiar with the McCrells. They're a band from around here, eh? And we had never seen the McCrells do a family set before. We wanted to see how they handled this. So we went over there, and we stood at the edge of the tent. We were standing by where the poles were holding up the roof of the tent, and we were watching the McCrells playing. And because we were standing, we could see what was going on behind the McCrells. And we saw the truck pull up, and we saw the driver get out and take that hose off the truck.
Yeah, and then we watched as the audience passed the grimace of disgust from one face to the next.
And then we watched the McCrells, and they were grimacing too. But Kevin McCrell, what a showman. The guy was unbelievable. He was playing his music. He reached into his pocket, took out his guitar capo, and clamped it on his nose and kept playing like nothing had happened. Unbelievable.
we never forgot that. And so this was the kind of thing that we were thinking about, believe it or not, during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I mean, the pandemic was hard for all of us. We know that in so many ways, unspeakably difficult and challenging for so many people.